The sun was slowly sinking behind the Arizona desert hills, painting the sky with warm shades of orange and purple. Samuel Grant wiped the sweat from his forehead as he leaned against the wooden fence of his ranch. It had been a long day of repairing broken posts, checking water lines, and guiding the cattle back toward shelter. Life on the ranch was not easy, but it was all he had known since he was a boy. The wide open land gave him peace, and the rhythm of everyday work kept his heart steady. Samuel was a quiet man who preferred the company of his animals rather than long conversations with people. He had learned long ago that life became less complicated when you didn't depend on others too much. Yet deep inside, he sometimes felt the weight of loneliness, especially on evenings like this, when the whole sky seemed to whisper stories of the world beyond his land. As he closed the gate for the day, his dog, Copper, lifted his head and let out a small growl. The sound was unusual because Copper was friendly and rarely growled unless something unusual caught his attention. Samuel straightened up and scanned the horizon. Far down the dusty road, a small figure was moving toward the ranch, slow, tired, but determined. At first, Samuel thought it might be a traveler heading toward the town. But the figure kept walking directly toward his ranch. He narrowed his eyes and stepped closer to the fence. The figure was tall, extremely tall, with broad shoulders and long strides, even though the person seemed exhausted. As the traveler came into clear view, Samuel felt a small jolt of recognition. It was Nina Tahoma, the woman the local communities respectfully called the giant Apache sister. She earned that name not because she was intimidating, but because she stood taller than most men, and was known for protecting the people in her village like an elder sister. Children admired her, elders trusted her, and many who knew her spoke of her calm strength. But the woman walking toward Samuel now did not look like the strong protector he had seen at gatherings years ago. Her steps wobbled slightly. Her clothes were dusty, her hair was messy, falling loosely around her shoulders. One of her arms seemed tense, as if she had been carrying something heavy for too long, and her face, though still composed, carried a tiredness that was hard to ignore. Samuel opened the gate slowly, keeping his tone neutral but kind. "Evening," he said. "Looks like you've been traveling far." Nina came to a stop a few feet away. She breathed deeply before answering, as if even speaking required effort. "I came down from the mountains," she said softly. "I just needed a place to rest for a little while." Samuel nodded. He was not the kind of man who asked too many questions. Still, he couldn't ignore how worn out she looked. "You're welcome to rest here," he said. "I have water inside, and a safe place to sleep." She hesitated before stepping forward. There was a faint gratefulness in her eyes, but also caution, the kind of caution people carry when they've been alone for too long. Samuel guided her to a wooden bench near the barn. He handed her a canteen filled with cold water. She took it with shaking hands and drank slowly. "How long have you been walking?" Samuel asked gently. Nina closed her eyes for a moment, collecting her breath. "A few days," she answered. "But that is not the real story." Samuel waited. He sensed that she needed time before she could explain anything. Copper sat beside them quietly, watching her with curious eyes. Finally, Nina looked up at Samuel, her eyes calm but heavy with emotion. "I haven't been with anyone in 6 months," she said. Samuel didn't respond immediately. He took her words exactly as she meant them. She had been alone, completely alone, for half a year. No company, no support, no voices around her, no one to lean on. 6 months of silence could change any person. He sat beside her, allowing a moment of quiet. "6 months is a long time to be by yourself," he said. Nina nodded. "I left my community after things became difficult. I wasn't angry at them. I just didn't want to bring my sadness into their lives, so I walked up into the mountains and stayed there, away from everyone." She paused. Sometimes it felt peaceful. Other times, it felt like the world forgot I existed. Her voice was steady, but Samuel could hear the truth behind it, the kind of truth that only comes after living through long stretches of loneliness. "What brought you down now?" he asked. Nina looked toward the horizon. A storm last week damaged the small shelter I built. Food has been harder to find. And, she paused again. This time her voice softened even more. I realized I couldn't stay alone forever. I needed to see another person. I needed to hear another voice. Samuel nodded slowly. He understood better than most what silence could do to someone's mind. Sometimes, even a strong person needed a moment of connection to stay whole. He helped Nina to her feet and guided her toward the barn loft, where he kept a small spare bed for visitors. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, safe, and warm. Nina climbed the wooden ladder slowly, her legs clearly weak from days of walking. "Thank you," she said quietly as she reached the top. "You can stay as long as you need," Samuel replied. "There's food in the house. Come down when you're ready." She gave a small nod before lying down to rest. Within minutes, the sound of her breathing softened into the slow, steady rhythm of deep sleep. Samuel watched for a moment, making sure she was comfortable, then climbed back down. For the rest of the evening, he worked with unusual focus, his mind returning again and again to the tired woman sleeping in his barn. He wondered what she had faced in those mountains, what memories she had tried to escape, and what pain she carried behind her calm expression. The sky darkened fully as Samuel finished his chores. The stars appeared one by one, scattering themselves across the cool night sky. Copper curled up near the front door of the house, while Samuel sat on the porch, his thoughts drifting. He couldn't shake the feeling that Nina's arrival was not just a random visit. Something had pushed her back into the world after 6 months of silence, something she hadn't yet shared. And Samuel, though a man of few words, felt a quiet responsibility to make sure she was safe until she found her strength again. Night settled peacefully over the ranch. A light breeze rustled through the dry grass. Somewhere in the barn, Nina slept soundly for the first time in months, and Samuel, sitting in the soft glow of the porch lantern, wondered what the coming days would reveal. He didn't know it yet, but her arrival was the beginning of a story that would change both of their lives in ways neither of them expected. The ranch, once a place of solitude, was about to become the setting of a journey filled with trust, healing, and understanding, a journey sparked by a tired woman's quiet confession that she had been alone for far too long. Outside, the moon rose high above the desert land, shining softly over the quiet ranch, where two lonely lives had unexpectedly crossed paths. Morning light slowly crept across the ranch, spreading a warm golden color over the fields. Samuel woke early, as he always did. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the soft smell of dry grass and warm earth. Copper wagged his tail, ready to start another day. But today felt different. There was someone else on the ranch, someone who had carried 6 months of silence with her. Samuel quietly stepped out of the house and walked toward the barn. He didn't want to wake Nina too early, especially after she had walked for days and finally rested. As he approached, he heard nothing except the gentle rustling of hay. He climbed the ladder slowly and peeked into the loft. Nina was still asleep, curled slightly on her side, her breathing deep and calm. She looked peaceful, more peaceful than she must have felt in a long time. Samuel didn't disturb her. He climbed back down and started preparing breakfast. He cooked simple food: warm bread, scrambled eggs, and a pot of coffee. It wasn't long before he heard footsteps outside the house. When he looked up, he saw Nina standing near the door. She was awake now, though still tired. Her hair was loosely tied back, and her clothes looked cleaner. She must have brushed herself off before coming in. "Good morning," she said softly. Samuel nodded. "Good morning. Feeling better?" She took a slow breath. "A little. I slept more than I thought I would." "That's what you needed," he replied. He gestured toward the table. Nina hesitated for a moment, then sat down across from him. She ate quietly, but he could see she was hungry. Her hands shook slightly as she lifted her cup of water, a sign that her body still needed rest. After breakfast, Samuel walked out to start his chores. To his surprise, Nina followed him. "You don't have to work today," he said. "You should rest more." Nina shook her head. "Resting all day will make my mind heavy. I'd rather help." Her voice was gentle but firm. Samuel could tell she didn't like sitting still, maybe because stillness reminded her of the long loneliness she was trying to leave behind. So he handed her a pair of gloves. "All right. If you want to help, let's start easy." They worked together in silence for some time. Samuel showed her how to refill the water troughs for the cattle. Nina's steps were careful, and her movements slow. But she stayed determined. Sweat gathered on her forehead under the warm sun, yet she didn't complain. Eventually, Samuel stopped her with a small smile. "You work like someone who hasn't rested in 6 months." Nina paused, then laughed softly, the first time he had heard her laugh. It wasn't loud, but it carried a gentle warmth that felt new on the quiet ranch. "You're right," she admitted. "My body forgot what normal work feels like." As they took a break under the shade of a mesquite tree, Samuel finally asked the question that had lingered in his mind since the night before. "What happened before you left your community?" Nina held the cup of water he had given her but didn't drink. Her eyes lowered. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Samuel didn't pressure her. He simply waited. Finally, she looked up, her expression deeper and sadder than he had seen before. "It started after my brother passed away," she said. "He was the one who understood me the most. We used to work together, travel together, talk about everything. When he died, I felt something collapse inside me." Samuel listened quietly. "I tried to stay strong for the others," she continued. "People expected me to be the tall, fearless sister, the one who could protect everyone. But my heart wasn't listening. I stopped talking much. I stopped eating properly. I became different." She paused, searching for the right words. "My community didn't know how to help me, and I didn't know how to help myself." The wind blew gently through the tree leaves above them. "One day," she said softly, "I realized I was starting to push people away with my silence. I didn't want to bring sadness into every home. So I left quietly and went into the mountains. I built a small shelter and tried to live simply. I thought time alone would heal me." "And did it?" Samuel asked. Nina looked at her hands. "Some days yes, some days no. There were mornings I felt calm listening to the birds and the wind. But there were nights when I wished I wasn't alone. I wanted to talk to someone, anyone. But pride kept me up there. Pride and fear." Samuel understood that feeling too well. Pride could be heavy. Silence could grow sharp. "So why did you choose my ranch?" he asked. Nina smiled faintly. "I walked past your land many times in the past. You were always quiet, always respectful at community gatherings. I remember thinking that if I ever needed a place to rest, your ranch would be safe. Not noisy, not crowded, just peaceful." Samuel felt something warm flicker inside his chest. He didn't speak loudly, but his words carried sincerity. "I'm glad you chose this place." For the rest of the afternoon, they worked in easy rhythm, feeding the animals, stacking hay, checking the fence line. Nina moved slowly but carefully. Samuel watched her closely, ready to stop her if she tired too much, but she pushed through with quiet determination. Later, as the sun began to lower, Nina stood overlooking the wide field. She breathed deeply, letting the warm wind brush over her face. Samuel noticed something different in her posture. A small sign of relief, as if her heart was slowly beginning to loosen. "This place," she said softly, "feels like air after being underwater for too long." Samuel looked at her. "Then stay until you can breathe fully again." She gave him a small, grateful smile. As evening settled in, they walked back toward the house. Copper trotted behind them, wagging his tail happily. Samuel cooked dinner, while Nina helped prepare the table. They spoke a little, just small things, simple stories, a few memories, but those small conversations filled the room with a gentle warmth that neither of them had felt in months. Later, when Samuel stepped outside to check the night sky, he found Nina standing quietly near the fence, looking at the stars. He joined her without saying a word. For a few long moments, they simply stood there, side by side, watching the soft brightness above them. Nina finally spoke. "I didn't realize how much I missed the sound of another person, even simple words. Even silence shared with someone. Samuel nodded. You're not alone anymore. She turned toward him with calm, thankful eyes. Thank you, she whispered, for giving me a place to be human again. Samuel felt her words settle deeply in his chest, honest, gentle, and full of the kind of honesty people rarely share. The night grew cooler, but neither of them felt cold. A strange comfort had settled between them, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet understanding that both of them needed. And in that peaceful silence, the ranch, once a place of solitude, began turning into a place of healing for both their hearts. Days passed gently on the ranch, each one unfolding with a calm rhythm that slowly brought comfort back into Nina's life. She grew stronger physically, and her heart became lighter as she spent time working with Samuel and talking during quiet evenings. She wasn't fully healed yet, but she was no longer carrying all her pain alone. Samuel noticed her progress every day. She smiled more often now. She spoke with a steadier voice. She even joked lightly at times, surprising him with a warmth he hadn't expected. Watching her grow stronger gave him a quiet sense of purpose he had not felt in years. But life isn't always smooth, even in peaceful places. And one afternoon, something happened that tested the fragile calm both of them had built. It was late morning when Samuel and Nina were fixing a broken section of the fence on the west side of the ranch. The work was simple, and Nina felt comfortable doing it now. She held the wooden post steady while Samuel hammered the nails. They worked side by side in silence, letting the wind and the occasional call of distant birds fill the air. Suddenly, Copper began barking loudly toward the main road. His tail stood stiff, his body alert. Samuel paused, mid-swing of the hammer. That's not his normal bark, he said. Usually he barks for excitement or strangers passing by. But this sounds different. Nina's eyes shifted toward the road. Even from far away, she saw dust rising, the kind of dust that comes when more than one person is walking or riding in. Someone's coming, she said quietly. Samuel wiped his hands on his shirt and narrowed his eyes at the figures approaching. 3 men, he said. From town, by the look of it. Nina felt her stomach tighten. It was a small reaction, but it carried the weight of old fears. She straightened her back, trying to stay calm. But Samuel noticed the way her fingers curled slightly at her sides. Do you expect trouble? He asked gently. She shook her head. I don't expect it, I just don't know. In a few minutes, the men reached the ranch gate. They weren't angry or shouting, just walking with purpose. One was tall with dusty boots, the second wore a wide hat pulled low, and the third carried a serious expression as if he meant to settle something important. Samuel walked toward them slowly. Nina stayed a step behind him, not hiding, but not eager to step forward either. Afternoon, Samuel called. Can I help you with something? The tallest man greeted Samuel politely before turning his eyes toward Nina. Recognition flashed across his face. There she is, he said softly. Nina Tahoma. Nina kept her posture straight. Yes, she replied calmly. What brings you here? The man removed his hat respectfully. We heard you came down from the mountains. The community has been worried for a long time. Some folks were concerned that you left without a word. They sent us to check if you were all right. Nina didn't expect that. She had prepared herself to hear criticism or complaints. But concern, honest concern, that caught her by surprise. Another man stepped forward. His voice was gentle. People thought maybe you were upset with them, or you felt unwelcome. They wanted to make sure you knew you could come home. Nina felt a strange warmth rise in her chest. For 6 months, she had imagined that everyone saw her silence as rejection. She thought people might be disappointed in her or confused by her disappearance. Hearing that they had worried, instead of judging, made her heart soften. But the third man, the one who looked most serious, spoke next. His tone wasn't angry, but it was firm. There was also confusion, he said. Before you left, there was a misunderstanding. Some families believed you didn't want to be part of the community anymore. Others thought you blamed them for your grief. There were rumors, questions, and no one to answer them. His words were not meant to accuse, but they carried the truth Nina had been avoiding. Samuel stepped slightly closer to her, offering silent support. Nina took a steady breath before speaking. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she said. "I didn't leave because of the community. I left because I didn't understand myself. I felt heavy, lost, and unsure of how to carry my pain. I thought leaving would protect others from my sadness, not cause problems." The tall man nodded slowly. "We thought as much. But silence leaves space for guessing. And guessing often leads to wrong ideas." Nina lowered her eyes a moment, then lifted them again with quiet strength. "I'm sorry my absence caused confusion." The men exchanged glances, and their expressions softened with relief. They weren't here to blame her, they were here to understand. Samuel decided to speak. "She's been resting here and getting stronger. She needed time, and she's taken it in peace." The men listened respectfully. The serious one asked, "Would you be willing to come visit the council? Just to clear things up properly? People would like to hear from you directly. It would help bring everyone back together." Nina hesitated. She had not expected this moment to come so soon. But avoiding it forever would only keep old fears alive. She finally nodded. "Yes, I'll go." Samuel felt a small, proud warmth in his heart. Her courage was quiet, but it was real. "We can escort you," the tall man offered, but Samuel stepped in softly. "She's staying here for now. I'll take her myself when she's ready." The men exchanged glances again, recognizing Samuel's protective tone. None of them argued. Before they left, the second man added, "A lot of people miss you, Nina. You were always someone we looked up to. Everyone hopes you come home soon." The words touched her deeply. She blinked slowly, holding the emotion steady in her chest. "Thank you," she said. When the men walked away, the ranch grew quiet again. Copper stopped barking and returned to Samuel's side. Sensing the shift in the air, Nina stood still for a long moment, watching the dust trail fade in the distance. Finally, Samuel spoke softly. "How do you feel?" Nina exhaled. "Like I've been carrying a fear that didn't need to be carried." Samuel nodded. Sometimes silence creates problems that never existed. She looked at him with grateful eyes. "Thank you for standing with me." "You don't have to face anything alone," he replied. As they walked back to the fence repair, Nina felt a mix of emotions: relief, nervousness, and a growing sense of hope. The truth was out now. People cared about her, missed her, and wanted her back. And Samuel had been there when she needed someone the most. For the rest of the day, they worked quietly. But it was a peaceful silence. Not the heavy kind Nina had lived with for months. She felt lighter, as if a door had opened inside her heart that she didn't know existed. When evening came, they returned to the house. The sky was soft pink and gold. The air was calm. And in that gentle sunset, Nina realized something important. She wasn't afraid anymore. The next step would be returning to her community, facing the misunderstandings, and reconnecting with the people she cared about. It would not be easy, but with Samuel by her side, she felt ready. The world had seemed so big and lonely in the mountains, but on this ranch, with honest words and steady kindness, the world slowly became warm again. And Nina knew that whatever came next would not just be a return, it would be the beginning of a new chapter she hadn't believed she would ever reach. The next morning came with a calm softness, as if the sky itself understood that this day was important for Nina. Gentle light spread across the ranch, touching the fields, the trees, and the small wooden house. Samuel stood at the porch, watching the sunrise while Copper stretched at his feet. He knew Nina would wake early today. She had a long journey ahead, not in distance, but in courage. When Nina stepped out of the barn loft, she looked stronger than she had in the past weeks. Her clothes were clean, her hair brushed, her shoulders steady. She wasn't completely free of worry, but something inside her had changed. For the first time in months, she looked ready to reconnect with the world she had once left behind. "Morning," Samuel greeted her. "Morning," she replied, with a calm smile. He could see a hint of nervousness in her eyes, and she didn't try to hide it. Instead, she walked to the fence and leaned on it, staring toward the distant path that led to her community. "Are you sure you're ready?" Samuel asked gently. Nina took a slow breath. "I am nervous. But yes, I am ready. I can't keep avoiding my people forever. They cared enough to send someone for me. That means something. It does." He agreed. They shared a quiet moment, letting the morning breeze settle around them. Then Samuel stepped toward his truck, patting the door lightly. "I'll drive you," he said. Nina hesitated. "You don't have to." "I know," he replied simply. "But I want to." Something soft and grateful filled her eyes. She nodded without saying anything more. The ride through the desert was peaceful. The sky stretched endlessly, the land open and wide like a calm ocean of sand, stones, and brush. Nina watched the scenery pass by, her hands resting quietly on her lap. Samuel kept his eyes on the road, allowing her space to think. After a while, she spoke. "I don't know what I'm going to say." "You don't need a perfect speech," Samuel said. "Just speak honestly. People listen to honesty, even when it's quiet." Nina smiled faintly. "I used to believe that. And somewhere along the way, I forgot. I once a day what? Away there wa. I once a day one. A 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 once a day. "You're remembering now," he said. The road continued, winding gently. As they approached the edge of the community, Nina's heart began beating faster. Memories came rushing back, faces of children laughing, elders offering guidance, families sharing meals, but also memories of her silence, her grief, and the emptiness she had carried alone. When the truck finally stopped, several people were already gathered near the small meeting lodge. They must have seen Samuel's truck approaching. Some faces showed relief, others curiosity, but none showed anger. Samuel turned to Nina. "I'll be right here." She nodded, opened the door, and stepped out slowly. The warm ground felt firm beneath her feet. The tall man from the day before stepped forward with a gentle smile. "We're glad you came." Nina felt her voice tremble slightly. "Thank you for welcoming me." The council invited her inside. Samuel stayed near the truck, giving her space. He trusted she could face this now. Inside the lodge, the air was calm and quiet. Several elders sat in a circle, their faces filled with kindness rather than judgment. Nina sat among them, feeling small yet supported. An elder woman, her hair silver and braided, spoke first. "Child, we worried about you. Not because you left, but because you carried your grief alone." Nina lowered her eyes. "I thought staying would burden everyone." Another elder shook his head softly. "You have always carried others. Letting others carry you once in a while is not a burden. It is balance." Nina felt tears rise not from sadness, but from relief. For months she had imagined her community misunderstood her, but here they were showing understanding she had never expected. "I'm sorry I disappeared," Nina said. "I wasn't myself. I didn't know how to speak without feeling my voice would break." An elder reached out gently, placing a hand on hers. "Grief breaks people differently. There is no shame in that." Nina breathed deeply. This was what she had been afraid of, being seen in her weakness. Yet they saw her with compassion instead of disappointment. The council spoke with her for a long time. They asked questions gently, listened carefully, and welcomed her honesty. By the time they finished, Nina's heart felt lighter than it had in months. Before leaving, the tall man said, "You don't have to move back today. Take your time. Heal at your own pace. You are always welcome. Whenever you feel ready." Nina nodded gratefully. When she stepped outside, she saw Samuel leaning against his truck, arms crossed loosely, eyes watching her with quiet support. "How did it go?" he asked. Nina walked toward him slowly, the emotion still fresh in her voice. "Better than I ever imagined. They didn't judge me. They didn't question my strength. They simply cared. Samuel smiled. That's what real community does. She stood there quietly, feeling the world settle gently around her. Can we go back to the ranch? She finally asked. You don't want to stay today? Samuel asked. Not yet, Nina admitted. I think I need a little more time before I return fully. But now I know I can come back when I'm ready. Then let's go home, Samuel said. Nina felt something warm inside her when he used the word home. The ride back was quiet but peaceful. The fear that had weighed on Nina's heart was gone now, replaced by relief and a new sense of direction. When they reached the ranch, Copper ran toward them, tail wagging wildly. Nina laughed and knelt to pet him, letting his happy energy wash over her. Samuel watched her with gentle eyes. You look lighter, he said. I feel lighter. She replied. Thank you, Samuel. If I hadn't come here first, I don't think I would have found the strength. Something%. Also Marding. I feel lighter first. I feel lighter first. I feel lighter first. I feel lighter first. I feel lighter found the strength. Butterf, you found it yourself, he said softly. I only gave you a place to rest. Nina looked at him, holding his gaze with quiet gratitude. That was more than enough. For the rest of the evening, they worked together again, feeding the animals, gathering wood, cooking dinner. Everything felt familiar and calm, but now the air carried something new, something warm and hopeful. Later, as the stars filled the sky, Nina walked to the fence and stood where she had stood many nights before. Samuel joined her a moment later, standing right beside her. I used to feel lost when I looked at the stars, Nina said softly. Now I feel connected. Samuel nodded. You're finding your place again. She turned to him. And you helped me find it. He didn't say anything at first. He didn't need to. Their silence held more meaning than many spoken words. Finally, he said, some people come into our lives quietly, and they change everything quietly too. Nina smiled, her heart full. I think we changed each other. The night air settled gently around them. The ranch, once a place of solitude for Samuel, was now a place of healing for both of them. And Nina, once lost in the mountains, now stood steady, held by the support of a man who understood silence as deeply as she did. She felt ready not to leave the ranch, not to rush her return, but to live fully again, at her own pace, with her heart finally breathing freely. And in that simple moment, under the quiet sky, both Samuel and Nina realized something beautiful. Healing doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes, it arrives softly, step by step, through honesty, kindness, and the courage to be seen again.